Hey everyone, it's your girl Amanda the author, and welcome back to my channel for another video. Now I know I took a bit of a hiatus. I needed to kind of get my brain together. I had a little bit of some personal stuff going on, but I'm excited to be back in these YouTube streets, and I'm especially excited about today's video because it's a little more personal for me. I am going to be talking to you a bit about my author journey from when I first kind of knew I wanted to be an author and what that process was like until now, after having published these 3 gorgeous books right here. But I'm not just gonna be, yammering on about my personal journey and not give you some tips along the way. I'm gonna be talking to you about some of the mistakes that I made so that you can avoid them, and talk about some of the things to help me be successful and things that you can probably replicate at whatever stage of the author game that you are at. Now, if you're an author and you're looking to get some insight into the writing and also the authoring process, including the nitty-gritty, kind of not so nice business parts of it, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You'll have fun, I promise. Let's get started. Alright, so I think it's safe to say that most people who want to be an author or have an idea that they're going to be an author start writing pretty young. And that's pretty much how it was for me. I started writing when I was about 13, 14. Actually, no. I started writing much earlier than that. If we're counting writing stories for one's Barbie dolls, then that was me. However, I really started putting pen to paper at about 14 years old. I was using it as an outlet to write a lot of the feelings I was having. I was going through puberty. I was fighting with my mom. I was the youngest in my family. I was the shortest in my family. Still am. And I just had a lot of things that I was working through, and writing was that escape for me. I didn't seriously look into it as a career possibility though until I was about 19, when I was in college, and I started writing what would eventually become To Astera with Love. That's really when I started thinking about this could be a career and kind of visualizing myself doing that for the rest of my life. As I mentioned, I wrote the first draft of To Astera with Love in college, and I started querying it almost as soon as I finished it, which I knew that having this conversation was opening me up for a little bit of a dragging, because I know now better that once you write your first draft, that's not the end. You should definitely come back, you should rewrite it, you should put your book down for a minute, come back to it, but I didn't at the time. So my first mistake in this whole thing is not doing rewrites and thinking that the first draft was the best draft, because 9 times out of 10 it is not. That's not to say that you won't keep some of the things and the essence in your first draft into like the rest of what you're writing, but honey, you really should be reworking your work multiple times to make it better and to make it a stronger piece. Don't just write a first draft and then think that you're done, because you've only just begun. Anyway, so my next thing I did after I wrote the first draft is I started querying, because at the time I wanted to be traditionally published. At the time, this was about 10 years ago. This was over 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago. And self-publishing isn't what it is today. It wasn't presented as and seen as a viable option for authors who really wanted to be taken seriously. There was a lot more stigma with self-publishing then as opposed to now, even though people still are reckless out in these streets and want to say that we're not like legit authors, which is not true, but that's a conversation for another day. So I queried, and I did not get an agent, right? I kept querying, I got a lot of rejections, which is par for the course. But my next mistake that I made here was this. I did not do a ton of research into the agents that I queried. I looked at them in terms of, do they represent the type of genre that I'm writing? Fantasy has so many different subgenres, and not everybody kind of likes to read or to handle those kind of subgenres. So my tip for you, if you are an author and you're wanting to query, is to do some research into the types of agents that you are interested in. Follow them on Twitter. Follow them, if you can, in other social media platforms. I think a lot of them are pretty active on Twitter, and they do talk about the kind of books that they represent, the kind of books they enjoy reading, and things like that. When you have an agent, from what I understand, again, I'm indie published, but from what I understand, you and your agent would work pretty closely together, and so like any other working relationship or any other healthy relationship. You want it to be one that is good and there's good communication and good vibes. So do your research into the agents that you're thinking of querying. So after that, I wrote another book and I started querying this one. I did go back and do some rewrites in this book. In fact, I ended up changing it from first person to third person, which was not fun. I don't recommend it. But this book, it is a book that I have not yet published. It's something I may publish in future, but it involves two sisters. One of them goes missing and they are taken captive by fairies. I did, as I said, did some rewrites, and then I also tried to query this book. Now, I was recommended an agent by somebody else who had been traditionally published, and this was their agent. I queried them, and I got probably some of the weirdest feedback I've gotten ever. And I'm gonna just read it to you. Here's what she said.
You've written a fairy tale for grown-up females because only females like fairy tales, and it has grown-up language.
Now, that's obviously not true. To me, that was a sign that this is not an agent that I wanted to work with, but it also is a sign that they don't have an understanding of the type of the market, because to say that only females like fairy tales is incorrect. You're cutting out an entire swath of the population. So my next, tip, I guess, here is to trust your instincts, and if you see an agent and you're querying and you kind of get a vibe from them that maybe they wouldn't represent your work well, or you are even talking to beta readers and they are giving you advice that just doesn't feel like it makes sense, they're wanting you to change kind of the core of your book for no good reason, then I would say, cut ties and don't engage with those people, with that agent, with those beta readers, because you don't want advice that's gonna, make you change the entire core of your book unless it's a plot hole. The other thing I learned here, and this is a lesson that every author learns at some point in their career, is that at some point, somebody's gonna not like your work. At some point, somebody or multiple people will have something to say, will want to do a negative review or have something negative to say about your work, and that's okay. People have opinions, they're entitled to their opinion. You put out the work that you feel represents you best, and that as long as your work is, edited professionally and there's not typos or grammatical errors, then that's fine. People are always gonna have something to say about your work, and it's up to you to figure out how you can take criticism, because it's gonna happen all throughout your writing career. There are going to be people who you are going to think will like your work that won't, and vice versa. Just as an aside, when I was writing the sequel, so to Alaris in Desperation, I fully had imposter syndrome. I fully had moments of thinking that people were not gonna rock with this as much as they did with this book, because as I was writing it, I was really getting in my head. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I've had so many people truly honestly love both books, especially Alaris, and so there will be negative critiques of your book. There will be people who will just hate on your book for no reason, and you're just gonna have to be okay with that. Now, I will say, going back to the criticism that I got from that agent, while the claim of only females which females just rubbed me the wrong way. But the criticism that only females like fairy tales is not true. But the kind of core of what she's saying is, mind the market. And while it is important to look at what's happening on the market, see what other people are writing, and take that into consideration, you should still write the book that you want to write. And just be mindful of what's happening in the market and how you can lend your voice and be different. All right, now after these two books, I queried them, all that happened. I had an author friend who is an indie author. She had been published already. I had her review what would eventually be To Stare with Love. It was the first draft that I had written in college. And this is kind of I would say one of the most pivotal moments for me in my author journey. She gave me some real tough love, kept him 100, and said, "This is cool. cool and all, but there's no plot. This is cool and all, but where's the tension? Where are the stakes? Where are things that will keep me reading? And after having a moment of just sitting there staring into space, because I really thought that, I thought my book was the shit. I thought I was gonna get better feedback. I resolved myself to, you know what? I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna review what I've written, and if I need to change it, then I will. And I did. I reviewed it. She was absolutely right. And I went completely back to the drawing board and got rid of that book. I say got rid of, I still have the draft on my computer somewhere. It's really embarrassing. I've read it time to time, and I'm a much better writer now. The thing I learned from this experience is that you should never be afraid to go back to the drawing board. If what you're doing or what you have done is not where it's at. I did not keep a lot from that original manuscript. In fact, the only things I kept were the names Alice and Joelle and the kind of concept of having vampires as villains. Everything else is very different from the original book, and for the better. So my next tip related to this is that you should have at least some idea of what's going to happen in your book. And I have mentioned on this channel before, anybody who knows me and my writing style knows that I'm a die-hard plotter. I plot hard. I plot and subplot and do intricate plots because it helps me in my anxiety. That's kind of the main reason why I'm plotting. To that end, even if you are a pantser, you should have some idea of what you want your book to be, what you want to happen from, beginning, middle to end, point A to point B. From what's going to happen at the end, you should know, or at least have some idea. Now, it might change, but having an idea will help you to make sure that your book is full of tension and that there's a plot and that people will keep turning pages as they're going through your book. After reviewing the book, after going back to the drawing board, that's when I got the basic idea for To A Stare With Love. I thought, what happens if, we had a vampire for a president and witches were persecuted and all of that, and I dreamed up my favorite so far, favorite main character, Mercury, and started writing my series. Initially, when I first started writing the book, I didn't think it was going to be a series, but here we are. I'm outlining book 3. And after I wrote the book, I found beta readers, and I found an editor, and I found a cover designer. There's a big story around my cover designer, and so I will be doing a video talking about how I found my cover designer. It's a pretty interesting story there. And along the way, I started joining writing groups on Facebook. And this is something that has helped me be successful and deadass helped me get through quarantine, which is that I joined writing groups and I made writing friends. People like to think that writing is a solitary practice, and in some aspects it is, but in most aspects it absolutely is not and should not be thought of and treated as such. You need to have writing friends that can help be your beta readers. They can be your cheerleaders because they know what it's like. Non-writing people, non-writing friends kind of tend to have a rose-colored glasses view, and although it is wonderful and exciting and it can be the greatest feeling in the world when you are world building and creating something from scratch from your head and putting it on a paper, it can also be a struggle. It can come with a lot of anxiety, a lot of second guessing, and meeting and discussing and talking with other writers, befriending other writers can really help. You can be each other's cheerleaders. You can read each other's work and help, figure out if the second guessing is, valuable or if it's meritless. If, maybe you're just tripping and your work is good and you're just like having an imposter syndrome moment. Find other writers, befriend them. They can be your beta readers. They can be your best friends. And that's definitely helped me get through. I would not be where I'm at if not, I wouldn't have published these. I certainly wouldn't have published this. This is the brainchild of myself and the other mods of Diverse Books with Magic. So we would not have published this and all the other anthologies that we've got planned, all the other books I have planned without my writing friends. So get you some writing friends. So the next thing that I did is, as I was writing To A Stare With Love and I had just finished the first draft, or I was in the process of finishing it, is I applied for a writing grant. This is the Walter Grant, We Need Diverse Books grant, and I really wanted to see if I can apply for it and get it because I wanted to be able to fund any book marketing that I was going to do. I wanted to be able to fund kind of potentially being able to take some time off from the job that I was working to be able to finish writing the book. I did not get the grant, but it was a great experience. Applied for it and really put myself in that mindset of gathering materials and really speaking about my work. So I would say, you know, my next tip that is good for me is get in the process of, as you're writing your book, learning how to speak about it and learning how to write about it, writing a synopsis for it, writing a longer pitch, a smaller pitch, a short pitch. You know, I've been thinking of doing a video where I'm talking about how to write a synopsis for your book, how to write a book pitch. So if that sounds good to you, go ahead and like this video and I will put that together in the future. But that process, that was one thing that came out of it, was learning how to write and talk about my book. The next thing that came out of it was I did actually get interest from an agent. She asked to see the first 15 pages and I sent them. She enjoyed that, liked the satire, but ultimately decided to pass on my book. And even though it was really difficult to take that rejection, because, you know, I thought I made it. I thought somebody was going to publish my book. I was like, yes, yes. It didn't work out, and that's okay. I, after that, decided that I was going to self-publish. So my next tip, idea, what have you, is that really, truly, honestly, sit down and ask yourself when you finish your book, what route you want to take. If you want to go traditional, that's totally cool. And it is its own process. I'm not traditionally published. I have simply queried, so I'm not going to speak too much on the process because I don't know beyond just how to put together a query letter, how to research agents and things like that. But you are here on my channel. I'm an indie author, so I have that advice for you. So when it comes to deciding to self-publish, it is a big decision. I would say it's not one that you should come to solely as a response of, well, I'm getting all of these rejections, so I guess I'll just self-publish. Because the reality is that self-publishing takes a lot. It's a huge commitment. It's not just a financial commitment, it's a mental commitment, it's a time commitment, it's an energy commitment. Because when you are self-published, honey, you are everything. You are the CEO, you're the founder, you're the CFO, you're the accountant, you're the chief marketing officer, you're HR, you're the talent, you're the booking manager, you're the cheerleader, you're your hype person. You are everything when you are self-published. Sometimes that can be a lot. It can be really draining to have to switch hats like that. Like that. That's how fast you have to switch hats when you are self-published. It's not a decision you should come to lightly. You should really think on it, maybe do a pros and cons list. But if you do decide to self-publish and ultimately it ends up being for you, I think you're gonna have a lot of fun. So after that, I published this first book in June 2020 amidst a whole lot happening in our country. Obviously could not have predicted it. I really am so happy that I was able to publish this actually just a couple of days after my birthday. And I think that I learned a lot from publishing this and also publishing this and also doing this one too. So in terms of tips for launch, my biggest mistake I would say that I made with these two books specifically is not having a fully realized launch plan. And that includes building out plenty of time just in case something happens. So for me, with this first book, I went through two cover designers before I found my actual cover designer. Again, that's another video that I'll be filming in the future. So that, you know, ate into my timeline. I also was not ready in terms of having a marketing launch plan. So I had to push my launch back from March of 2020 to June 2020 to accommodate for having more time to promote this book. For this book, it was right around the time when there was a huge hurricane in Louisiana. My editor lives in Louisiana. Shout out to Erica. Hey girl. And so I ended up having to put a pause on this and push back the pub date to allow for her to be able to get back my final edits because she lost power. Obviously, that's not something that I could have foreseen, neither could she, but I think if I had built in a little bit more time, and the timeline was already cutting it close to begin with, if I would have built in a little bit more time up front, then I would have been able to kind of account for any kind of issues that she, myself, even my cover designer, even my interior layout designer might have had. My tip is when you're putting together a launch plan, account for potential calamity, and you know, that way you can avoid having to push your dates back, because nobody wants to be known as the girl who keeps, you know, pushing around their pub dates. Additionally, I wish I would have had more of a full-scale marketing plan together for both of these books. I knew a little bit more, and I was able to do a little better job when I launched Alaris, but certainly for To Astera, I was overwhelmed, and I did my best. And ultimately, that's all one can hope for. But my next tip, or this tip, is essentially about being prepared. So do your research, be prepared. Now, after I published this, or kind of around the time, a little bit before I published Alaris, and after co-publishing Girls of Might and Magic, my next thing I did after doing these two, and kind of in between starting the book I'm currently working on now, which is In the House of Transcendence, is I started my YouTube channel. And the reason why I started this channel from jump is I really wanted to have another way to reach out to my readers and other authors. I wanted to provide some tips and tricks, and also give some insight to the writers, non-authors out there, into kind of the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty of what it takes to publish, to self-publish a book. And because a lot of my audience and a lot of my readers are also authors, I wanted to, be a resource, be that place, that go-to place for everybody to get some insight and some tips into writing and authoring, and how to take care of your mental when you're doing both. My next tip is to be somewhere other than social media, other than Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. While those platforms are important and you should have a social media presence, like this video, if you'd like me to do a whole video on social media for your authors, but it's important to have a presence. It's also important to be other places. It's important to have something like a blog, a newsletter, certainly having a website, or being here on AuthorTube. So not only are you able to talk about your books, you're able to, talk about something that you are a subject matter expert in, and give some tips and tricks. And also it's more content, more visibility for you, which could potentially mean more book sales. So consider a newsletter, consider doing an AuthorTube, considering having a blog on your website, which you should have, and that would be my other tip there. I have also started Lit Bitches, which is my bi-monthly series that I'm working on with two other indie authors. We were talking about all things authoring and books, and things we like and don't like about both. I'm currently working on my book, In the House of Transcendence, which is another magical book separate from my series, and I'm currently outlining my third and final book in this series. So my tip here is just to write. Make time for writing. Even though self-publishing requires a lot of you, it requires a lot of your time, you'll be doing a lot of different things. It's obviously extremely important to make sure that you are making time for writing, that you're making time to do the thing that you are passionate about. Not to say you can't be passionate about the marketing aspect. It's fun, but ultimately you got into this whole thing to be able to write, so make sure that you are actually doing that while you have your hands in other things. So that wraps up this very random, potentially stream of consciousness video. Hopefully these tips helped you. Certainly it was weird and also interesting going through some of my mistakes and telling you things to avoid and things to do. If you made it this far, great, thank you. Go ahead and like my video. I would appreciate it, and subscribe to my channel. I will be uploading one video a week, so you can look forward to that. And like I said, talking about writing, authoring, from the manual aspect of it to kind of the mental things that'll help you be your best writing self. So I had fun. I hope you all did too, and I will talk to you later. Bye!